Hello and welcome to a lecture on 2.12a, which is looking at the Chesapeake Bay region, and this is the first one. So 2.12, in the 17th century, early British colonies developed along the Atlantic coast with regional differences. So we have different regions along them, and generally, New England, middle colonies, southern on this map, but a little bit more specific. The first one that this lecture will look at, Chesapeake Bay and Tobacco, New England, starting off with Massachusetts Bay, the middle colonies, New York and Pennsylvania, the southern colonies, South Carolina, rice growing, and then the southernmost, which are the sugar plantations of the Caribbean, and also a frontier region, that area where it's not settled very well and it's dangerous with natives and wildlife, and you're on your own. Now, this one looking at Chesapeake and North Carolina, which grew rich off of tobacco and labor is a very important concept in this one. Indentured servants and then later Africans. So you want to start a colony? Well, you need money. So a pool of people, or a group of people pooling their money together, including the king, set up the Virginia Company, named after Queen Elizabeth I, or the Virgin Queen. She's unmarried, and you need permission from the king and queen, a royal charter, and now you've got the ability and the authority, and you need people. And it's a weird group of people who are willing to give this a go. First off, enclosure laws in England are creating a large group of landless peasants, the poorest, who are willing to give it a shot, mixing in with aristocrats. Primogeniture laws are laws that forbid a landowner from dividing up his lands among all of his children, instead giving it all to the firstborn son. So the second, thirdborn, these economic losers who get nothing, they're willing to give it a go and hoping to strike it rich in land or gold over in this new world, and then that opportunity for a fresh start. So they go over, the Virginia Company, and they set up a colony they call Jamestown after King James I. And there it is there on the Chesapeake Bay on the James River. And it struggles at the beginning from disease, lack of food, natives, fire, a hostile climate, and a lack of leadership. These people, these boys and men, they're hoping to strike it rich. And there's not really good leadership to get things going. This is a private enterprise hoping to strike it rich with gold or land. Young men with dollar signs in their eyes, fixated on getting rich quick, and they're not concerned with the hard work that's necessary to survive in the long run. Food, water, defense, these kinds of things. They're hoping to trade with the natives for food. The natives don't have a supply of food to trade to them, and so there's a lot dying off. One guy, early leader John Smith, came out with the rule, work or you don't get food, but he returned to England. They would undergo a starving time. They'd barely survive. It's a financial failure. The company goes broke. The king takes control of the colony. And it's only surviving because each year new people are coming in to replace those dying off. So think of it like a conveyor belt, with at one end the dead falling off, and at the other end new coming on, and then they go along the belt and fall off, but new are coming on. And in this way, it's able to survive these early dark years. Now, Powhatan, the natives. Powhatan is a strong chief, and he has an alliance of natives. And at first, he's nice towards them. He sees them as trading partners, potentially a way to expand his power. He marries off his daughter Pocahontas to a leader. You might know the Disney movie. But in time, two wars will break out between this. And the first one, under the orders of the Virginia companies, to drive them off using Irish tactics. These are tactics that the English used against the Irish, which is total war, where you target food and housing and women and children, and it's genocide. The English were smart and evil to wait until just before the harvest of the food to burn down the food crops, and the natives would endure difficult winters of not enough food, and the disease is also wiping them off. The second one was initiated by the natives as a last effort to stave off the English. Surprise attack at first, and the initial success, but ultimately they're doomed and they're forced out of the region forever. So this then, along with the real gold that helps them off, the brown gold of tobacco. John Rolfe had brought it in. He'd managed to get tobacco out of the Spanish colonies where it was forbidden to take it out, and it did very well in Virginia. It grew extremely well. We can see here the amount of tobacco being exported out, this rapid growth in tobacco. So they've got everything they need except one. They got the land, they got the tobacco, they've got a good climate, they've got a good market in England. The king had banned it, so everybody wanted to do it. And they need labor. So how are we going to get people over? So they came up with a system. If you pay to bring people over to Virginia to work, then you'll get land. And so this is an opportunity for those who already have a little bit of land to get more land. And if you are poor, how do you get over yourself? Well, you sign a contract and you become an indentured servant, where you go under contract 4 to 7 years, and when it's over, you can get some land yourself. And then it's an opportunity for the poorest to move up in life. But servants, they're from the poorest class of England, and especially Ireland. They were essentially slaves with no rights and no protection from abusive masters. Rape and violence was not uncommon, and many did not survive the terms of service because of the labor, the disease, the malnutrition, etc. And those who are able to come over and survive early on are going to eat up and gobble up the best land. And this leads to a dichotomy known as the tidewater versus the frontier, or the haves and the have-nots. The tidewater, it's called this because you're in the best land here, closest to the ocean, where it's good soil, and they gobble up all this best land, and leaving for those coming later, the have-nots, to be up in the frontier, up in the mountains there. And this is sort of the line, dividing line, the best land, the not so good land. So the tidewater, the stereotype, they're aristocratic and urbane, rich, showing off. They've got the big house and they're focused on trade and the Atlantic, and these are the wealthy and the powerful. The frontier is sort of the poor people, and they're trying to open up this not so good land in the west. And the resourceful, independent people, you have to be. You got to look after your own in this dangerous world. And they resent that there's not really a policy to help defend against the natives. The Tidewater is not really concerned about that, and paying high taxes. And we see this theme in a number of rebellions in time. The Bacon's Rebellion, the first one, the Whiskey Rebellion, is over 100 years later. But they all have that same theme of frontiers people resenting natives and high taxes, and distant authorities not caring for them. And we'll look at Bacon's Rebellion very shortly. So there's a Virginia plantation mansion. So the rich, we get a very sort of a prosperous group of people who will own a lot of land. Later they'll own a lot of slaves as well, and getting rich off of tobacco. And they control the House of Burgesses, the first elected assembly in the New World, an important key concept. And it's leading to rebellion. So what's causing it? Well, resentment towards the governor, Governor Berkeley, who's seen as an elitist, and he's giving land to his inner circle, and he's got a monopoly in the fur trade, and he's imposing high taxes. And the people in the frontier resenting this distant authority who's not helping to fend off against natives. And these are landless former servants with nothing to lose. And under the leadership of Berkeley, they march in, they burn down Jamestown. Bacon dies, Nathaniel Bacon, the leader, and the rebellion collapses, but it's got some important long-term effects here, with the English crown concerned about the disruptions to the trade, and they want to see that this doesn't happen in the future. So how do we can't just bring in more and more indentured servants. There's no land for them anymore. And so we're going to get the shift away from indentured servants towards African slaves, as Jamestown being burned down. And this is showing the growth of the black population in Virginia and the change. So the Bacon's Rebellion right there, and we can see it's after this that growth in the black population comes in. So indentured servants, they're cheaper than African slaves, which is why they were used. But the rebellion exposed the limitations of using indentured servants. Servants can escape easily, they can blend in with other poor whites, they're vulnerable to disease, and many did not survive the contract to begin with. African slaves, they can't sort of escape and blend off, and they're not as vulnerable to the diseases. And they're more costly at the beginning, but they're under slave for life, and so there's more incentives. And so this rebellion brings to mind two important themes in history: the haves versus the have-nots, and also American resentment and distrust of distant authorities. And in this case, it was the frontiers people distrusting the authority of Governor Berkeley. Later, the colonies distrusting the authority of the king over on the other side, as another one. And this is just another sort of way to look at it here, with early on a high mortality white indentured servants. Here's sort of the shift into using more and more blacks, and afterwards the labours under slaves, racial slavery, and black African slavery. And we'll look at more at that in a later lecture. All right, thank you very much for listening.